From in the beginning to the musical apocalypse, this is The Bible Says What. I'm your host, Mike Wiseman. The sense of community, the belonging to something greater than ourselves, stems from deep in our genes. The benefits from being a part of the herd can easily be recognized by observing the non-human life forms we share this rock with. The social draw and need comes straight from our evolution. Evidence has shown that we are nothing more than advanced mammals, walking upright and destroying our own homeworld. But with this great power comes great responsibility. If Uncle Ben gets it, why is it so hard for the Christian Holy Book or the all-knowing deity they worship to grasp that concept? Most Christians have taken the words written in Genesis to mean they can do whatever they want to this world. According to many of them, this planet is a birthright from their creator. Some will even use the ridiculous excuse that Yahweh will rapture the Christians before the destruction of this world, whether it be by human hands or divine vengeance. These Bible-based myths have done nothing for the progression of the human race, nor has it helped us understand our connection to this planet and all the creatures on it, big and small. It has hindered our advancement, stunted our growth as a species, and kept us from achieving great things. The building of a mammoth monument to an invisible person is impressive, but have you tried to solve world hunger or fix the issues of deforestation? What good has the Bible done for humanity? It's given people a false hope in an unproven and extremely unlikely afterlife. It's caused countless people to fear a made-up place, a pit of fire and torture. It's caused women to be degraded and the LGBTQ community to be outcast. It was the basis and the very backbone of belief that slaves should be kept in the U.S. If used as directed, the Bible is one of the most dangerously disadvantageous books ever created. Let's start the show.
Is there anything in the Bible that you yourself have an issue with?
A divine blast.
Actually enjoyed arguing with you and stuff.
God doesn't kill children.
What do you think the Passover was? Are you reading a different Bible?
No.
You worship him because of the things he's done. Why can I not judge him because of the things he's done?
Obey me or I'll kill your kids. It doesn't seem very holy
Well,
to me.
that's brutal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, man, what a tough life.
Today's special guest is host of the This Could Be Interesting show, Garrett Vandenberg. Vandenberg. That's how you say it, right?
Right, Vandenberg.
All right. Garrett Vandenberg. Welcome to the show, Garrett.
Good to be here, man.
Thanks for coming on, taking the time. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Well, you mean with the show or in real life?
In the show.
Yeah. So This Could Be Interesting is a project I just started this year, kind of out of frustration with the sorts of conversations I noticed were going on. I guess I said I noticed because I was kind of pointing at other people, but I started to realize, okay, this is a problem in me too. I think in general, and again, I can't speak for the world, but I can speak for myself and say, I think I am getting worse at having conversations with people. I think I'm jumping to conclusions and I'm getting more quickly jumping into a fight or flight mode than I should be. And this is a problem. I don't like this behavior in me, and I don't like it in other people. What can I do about this? So, I mean, I guess the best solution I could come up with was just to practice. So essentially the show is an opportunity, a space for me to go and talk to people, specifically people who see the world differently than me, and just practice getting through those moments of tension. And so partially it's that, and partially it's talking to other people that I respect and I feel like have good ideas who might be able to give me some tips on working on some of these problems that I'm kind of struggling through.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. I'll be on there later today. I'm very excited. So, fight or flight about the conversation. Is there a certain conversation that you've had that you just didn't want to be a part of, and
I mean,
too much for you?
I mean, two of the most easiest conversations to get to that zone are, conversations about theology or about politics. And
so true.
I don't know. Those are the two kinds of conversations I think I enjoy having most.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Well, that makes sense for you made the show that way, if that's your favorite,
yeah,
topic.
I guess for some reason I'm drawn to it, but then I don't know. It's kind of a weird tension there because I'm noticing like it's like that's what I like to do. That's what I'm drawn to. But then as soon as I start picking up one of those conversations, it tended to go south. I mean, you said is there a conversation that's evoked that fight or flight response in me? Yeah, especially a lot growing up in I grew up in very kind of charismatic Christian circles and had a lot of like debates about the existence of God and the verifiability of the Bible and the Genesis account. I mean, I had some really interesting conversations trying to defend 6-day creation and stuff like that.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's pretty. So you grew up in the church?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, my only education is like I went to Bible school and I was homeschooled. So I was definitely deep in the church.
What was your homeschool program? Because I did the PACE program, that accelerate or ACE program, the Accelerated Christian Education. It was terrible.
It was through I think they were called Tree of Life.
Interesting.
Which I think was a Christian institution too.
Well, Tree of Life. I mean,
well, it's got to be due to some. I mean, other mythologies have trees of life too. I mean, you get the Norse mythology, you got Yggdrasil.
So true. Lots of trees. There's a lot of things with trees. Trees are awesome. I mean, sun as well. That's very interesting. So you had this upbringing. You were in the church, but you were able to have those debates, those conversations. Well, who were you having them with, or what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up. I guess I should go into a little bit of my backstory. Yeah, I grew up as part of like a country gospel touring Christian music band. Like that was what my grandparents did. So
wow, that's exactly what my grandparents do. That's hilarious.
Yeah, man, it's so funny. They felt the call, they felt the call to ministry, and they went in and they started doing. I guess actually originally it was like just their church and their community is like that was something that fit for them, and they were kind of leading community in song, and then it became something that they could do. I mean, try to think about the 70s, 60s, something in there that like that was when it was like that was a big thing for like Christian evangelists and music to like travel around and go to churches. So they were like really going hard with it for a long time. It was like several nights a week. I think sometimes 5 nights a week they were playing at different churches. I mean, people were really into church back then. Wow. But it continued to be a thing all the way up until, I mean, all my mom and her 2 sisters, they both got married, and my dad decided to like join the touring band, and he played like bass keyboard or something like that. And eventually amazing. It came to like us kids. We joined in, and then so I was playing drums for their band. And so that was like, I grew up homeschooled and on the road doing that because that was the only option. It's like, you can't go to public school if you're on the road. And so it was like, I was part of this ministry going around spreading the gospel. And that's an interesting way to grow up. But within that, it was like the only way I was able to have a sort of consistent social community would be online. Mm-hmm. Right. So, I mean, I was meeting people every week, but they were not consistent relationships. So the only way to try to do that was to like go and join some online communities and talk to people. And so, I mean, I had lots of debates, and I always liked just getting in fights with people. I definitely did a lot of like online debating with people, and trying to defend my beliefs. And I got really into like apologetics in high school. I thought that was like, I need to know how to defend my faith.
Yeah.
And it was exciting to me then. I mean, I still am really, I enjoy technical conversation. I like that logical side of like trying to argue out an idea. Like that was at least maybe the foundation for where I started to notice this problem and started to like feel, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I was having these conversations with people. I was trying to. It was fundamentally though the framing of the conversations though was like a debate or like a fight to see who could win and who could find the truth, right? And I mean, I think that's that same vein I see on social media now, and kind of what drew me started to feel like. Well, I guess probably what broke me into it originally is just that I started to realize that I was wrong about some things, or just that. I mean, sometimes you realize you're wrong about something because somebody's explained to you what the right thing is.
Right.
And it's like suddenly it's like, now I can let go of that, and I've got this new right thing, and then you still have that confidence of being right. But what really started to make me uneasy was I started to ask questions that I could not come to a certain answer.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like that could be pretty frustrating if most of your life, most of your security, most of your confidence is built on being extremely certain about things and being everything you believe.
Yeah.
And like when you start kind of reaching the bedrock of belief and what it is that you're doing with life. I mean, again, my whole life was based around this.
Yeah.
And when you start to reach the bedrock of like, why is it that I believe this? And you realize it's not based on reason. It's based on intuition. It's based on just believing something.
Huh.
That's a pretty, well, it's a paradigm shift anyways from the totally dogmatic, like logic, reason-based living that I was trying to be consistent with up and through high school.
You're cutting out a little bit there. Sorry, I'm just trying to follow you. So you what did you discover through all of these debates and whatnot? Like you started apologetics. Did you get out of apologetics because of the things you discovered? Like what was like this groundbreaking revelation?
I mean, I had a lot of conversations where I felt very self-assured afterwards that, they just didn't get it. And maybe next time I'll get them. But I mean, probably something changed when I was in Bible college, and a roommate had a different perspective. I mean, evolution's a great topic to go to because it started to kind of dip our toes into that question of like, well, are there other takes on this? Initially, it was like I was really into this guy, Kent Hovind. Have you heard of Kent Hovind?
Yeah, I've heard of that
guy. And I mean, he's doing what he feels convicted to do. Good for him. But maybe we can talk about him a little bit. Definitely does some funky stuff. But I watched a conversation between him and this other guy, Hugh Ross.
Mm.
And that was one of these first conversations that really catapulted me out into these waters of the unknown, where it was like, okay, these guys, this isn't just a simple, like, I can easily villainize the guy who's not taking my position, because both of these guys claim to be Christians.
Huh.
Both of these guys claim to have like a deep respect for the Bible and even believe that it's true. And despite that, there's, I mean, Hugh Ross believes that the Earth is as old as astronomers would say that it is, or as Kent Hovind would say that it's like 6,000 years or 10,000 years old, something like that. So like young Earth creationism, and right. Hugh Ross is like, no, I believe. So he still believes in like distinct creation events, like that there was like a time when God created this animal, and a time when God, which I mean, you could read that into an evolutionary story about, I mean, you could say that God created something, even if you're trying to, I mean, so it was, young Earth creation, and then that got challenged by somebody else who was a Christian saying maybe old Earth creation. I was like, well, I can't actually, I mean, that sounds more convincing. And then I was like, well, what about theistic evolution? And so then I started to find other Christians who were, supported theistic evolution. And I was like, oh, crap, well, now I have no idea where to go, because how much of this thread can I keep pulling and unwinding this tapestry of belief that I've had?
Yeah. Well, where did it end? What do you believe now? Where are you at this point in your belief in the Bible itself? Let's go with Bible and Yahweh. What are your belief between those two? What's Garrett believe?
Okay, so hard to find a good starting place there. I mean,
is the Bible a source for morality?
Yeah, I would say that. It's just that no matter what answer I give here, I need to just, I want to dive into like why. I mean, the simple answer to that question is not that interesting. It's just saying yes or no, right?
Right.
I mean, I think, I mean, you mentioned mythology before we started here. It's like, I think that
Right.
tradition, religion, those are ways in which we can kind of look into the past and see what people sort of intuitively thought was valuable about life. And
Yeah.
we can also, like, okay, there's traditions, there's people groups that didn't last until now. And so your purely pragmatic perspective, you can kind of look and see, okay, this is the religion of a people that is still around, or this is a religion that's lasted a really long time. What is it about these beliefs that has that stability that like somehow preserve this people?
Well, if you look at the religions and preserving religions, Hinduism is the oldest religion.
Sure.
So, and then there's other religions that actually come way before Christianity, even before Judaism, like Hinduism, and I think Zoroastrianism. I think. But there's definitely some stuff that comes before them. And then when you look at the history of how the Bible got started, because that's where I kind of went to eventually with my mythology search was, well, how the hell did this whole thing get started? Where did the Bible come from? Like, where do these stories and these ideas originate? Well, it turns out a lot of them originated in Canaan, the land they kind of went into. I mean, regardless of the Exodus story, we know that's probably not true. There's no way that many people crossed that far and escaped without any kind of notice and whatnot. So I guess I go with the trickle out theory, where there's just a few here and there. They probably passed by some place that had a town named Yahweh or some shenanigans, and you've already got Elohim and El as the chief deity for Canaan. So it's just kind of a mashup, and that's what happens with religion as it goes through time. They just kind of mash things up. The stories, like the stories nowadays, we do the same thing.
And you could even see I mean, nowadays we even will compare different tellings of the same story and say, well, I think this is the more canon version. This is the better version. This is the definitive version of the story, right? So I mean, I'm not arguing that Christianity or that the Bible is like the first time these great stories have ever been told. I was thinking about that phrase earlier today, greatest story ever told. Again, I mean, this is down to an intuition, but not down to something. It would be difficult to figure out how to vet this statement. But I think that the Bible might be the greatest story ever told. But I think I might even go further and say that I think it might be the greatest telling of the greatest story ever told. Because I don't think it's the first telling of it. I mean, there's plenty of mythologies that are tapping into a lot of the same motifs that the Bible is talking about, right? And to me, that's wow, all the more reason to take these stories seriously, that they're showing up everywhere.
Well, see, the thing is, the Bible's actually tapped into these other religions and these other ideas and taken them for their own. A lot of the Psalms were originally for Baal, from what I understand.
Right. Yeah.
And they just kind of put Yahweh in there, and like we do nowadays with I just want to go to Amy Grant for some reason, but with our music nowadays, you just put Jesus or God in there, and it's all of a sudden it's a Christian song.
I think that's a good example though, because when you do that and when it's just sort of a pandering to an audience and you just kind of slap a new name on something, that kind of, I mean, even looking at it, that kind of music doesn't, unless there's somebody really, really doing something deeply artistic in it, that's tapping into something really, doesn't tend to last. People forget about it because it's forgettable. Right? It's not good music.
Well, I don't know. My mom still likes Amy Grant, I think.
I'm not trying to make a sweeping statement on Amy Grant. She's talented.
I guess some people still like Amy Grant. Let's not piss them off. Oh man. But do you see what I'm saying though? It's how do you claim these as, okay, well let's go to the Yahweh. Who is Yahweh to you? Is he the guy that started these stories? Or is he the guy that was originally there and just kind of hijacked these stories? Who is Yahweh to you?
I think, just talking about gods or God, particularly the God of Christianity, it always gets dicey. It always gets strange because you're talking about something that it's impossible to talk about without sort of analogy. So, even you're saying this guy, right? I mean, that seems to be the most common way to think about gods, right? I mean, all these different traditions, including Christianity, we talk about God as, in my tradition, we talk about God as our Father, right? And it's the way I personally try to deal with that is okay, whatever this thing, the God is, again, it's like I have to appeal to my tradition and say this is at least what we through a long period of time have considered to be the most useful way, the most meaningful way of relating to this concept, deity, person, thing, whatever it is. It's like maybe it's one of those things, maybe it's all of those things, maybe it's none of those things. It's just like that's one way of having a relationship with this. What is it?
You said
right?
the word.
Like,
You said the word relationship.
Yeah.
Now I got to go there, man. I got to go.
Okay.
So how do you have a relationship with this guy, this thing? Well, I go guy, he, because that's the way he describes himself in the Bible. If we're taking the Bible as an autobiography written by Yahweh, essentially through the Holy Spirit. But I go with the he. So what did I ask? I totally forgot where I was going with that.
Well, you're talking about having a relationship with God.
There it is. Thank you. Man, that went off. Relationship. How do you have a relationship with him? I'll say him for sake of argument.
Sure, exactly. It's like, what else are you going to say? I mean, so I haven't actually read any of this guy's stuff, but this riff has come up at a couple different conversations I've had recently. Talked about Martin Buber. I'm just looking him up now. I think he's a literary translator, probably philosopher. He talks about this concept, though, of having an I-thou relationship with reality, with things, with like this idea of. So again, I'm just kind of riffing off of what people have told me recently. I haven't read this guy's stuff.
No, you're good.
I just remembered his name. But I mean, there's a difference between treating something as an it and as a you, right? And when you treat something as an it, primarily, it's like objects are things that I can use for my own purposes. Like I know how to use that to do what I want to do. This is an it. This is a cup because I can use it as a cup. Right?
All right.
But part of what seems to be fundamental about relating to the thing that we call God, this person that we call God, is that it's not about utility. It's not about something I can use God for.
Okay.
It's about transcending myself, about being part of something that's larger than I can comprehend. Right.
Okay.
And so,
like the universe. Like we're all part of this or the Earth itself. I can't even comprehend the massive size of this planet because I can only go so far on it. But it's huge, and to be a part of something, to be a part of the humanity that is on this Earth, and we're present at this time. I think that's pretty amazing. In this point in history, that's something that we could be a part of, and that's a relationship I can actually see, feel, touch, smell. I can even taste the earth if I want to. Probably don't want to, but dirt don't taste.
Well, I mean, you can't actually see, touch, taste, or smell the entire earth.
You can if you wanted to. I could take on a plane and I could literally go to each spot if I had enough money and time and see, touch, taste, and feel. But Yahweh, on the other hand, or any of these other Jesus or anybody, I can't. They're not there. They're not physically here. They're on another plane of existence, apparently. I mean, I don't know how that works. How do you have a relationship with somebody that's on a different plane of existence?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, that's why it's like I struggle to even think about this idea of someone. It's like, part of it is just like, part of being part of a religion is that you get to, I mean, my personal way of processing this is that I get to kind of have this this benefit of being able to like appeal to the group mind, and also have my own personal take on things. And so I can kind of point and I could say, well, this is what my community believes. And as a willful part of that community, I sort of indirectly believe this, or I can tell like what I personally have been able to figure out. But it's like there's a limit there because I only have the amount of time that's in my life to kind of figure out what I believe about stuff. So there's this like really compressed amount of information that I can like be really certain of, or at least have like a really thought out opinion on, because it takes a while to have an opinion on stuff, and especially to try to think out an intelligent opinion on stuff. And it's like, if you can be part of a community, I mean, it's part of what we do just by appealing to scientists. It's like, okay, I haven't done the work here. I'm appealing to a community that's done some work here, and I trust that community, and I'm willing to kind of go to bat for them to some extent. I mean,
the evidence points in the right direction and whatnot, that they're trustworthy. Yeah, for sure.
And it's hard again because it's like I can't even do a proper evidential test of the entire scientific community too, because there's different levels of bias. I can read it through. I can be like, well, I mean, scientists told me to do this and it didn't work. And, you know, some people, I mean, especially right now, there's a lot of people struggling to figure out how much we should trust, like, just the flat advice of scientists, especially when they disagree, right? It's like, it is, all right, maybe that's a little bit off the left field.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll return to my own, well, I mean, you asked me a question about what I believe about, let me see if I can trace it back, about who Yahweh is, or how can you have a relationship with somebody that you can't see?
Right, on a different plane of existence.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about the plane of existence stuff.
Do you think he's here? Or it, he, yeah, she?
I mean, the early church fathers say something like that God is like a circle whose center is everywhere, but whose border is nowhere.
Well, that's funny. It's kind of funny because he originated in the Old Testament stuck on a mountain, and then he had to have a tent, special tent, and he could only go there. You know, he was very restricted, and now he's everywhere. You know, I find it funny. You know, he's
I'm trying to think of a good analogy, though, of this, like having a relationship with something you can't see. Because, I mean, to one extent, you could say that you have a relationship with, again, all of the relationships that you have with people are relationships with things that you can't experience to their, you know, full extent anyways, but you do have sort of visual cues about, like, I mean, you're not in front of me. I don't have all the evidence I would need to, like, know that you're not a deep fake or something like that. But
I'm here. I'm real.
I believe that you're there. But I mean, the sense in which I believe that God is there is not, it's not as simple as that, because again, I'm kind of thinking about something that's a lot more difficult to comprehend it and wrap my head around. So it's not like God is there. You know, he's just like a person who's just invisible and is just kind of blanked out of my view of existence. It's more,
Well,
I don't know. I mean, I can think of God as sort of being even like an abstraction of human consciousness, though I don't think that my religion would back me up on that.
Do you think we are created in his image? And what do you think that means?
Do I think we were created in God's image?
Because if we're in his image, we would be able to see a physical human form. There would be a form of Yahweh somewhere out there that looks like an old man, most likely with a giant beard, and hopefully he's bald.
I mean, it's like, depending on what you mean by image. But I mean, especially probably more depending on what the people who wrote those texts, I assume this is Old Testament.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about where they say that. But I mean, I know what I've been learning recently a little bit about the way ancient peoples like talk about stuff like images or body parts and things like that, is that they're a lot more in line with a much less scientific view of the world than we do. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I just mean that, like, they were concerned more with a phenomenological world rather than you know, a world in which you're like trying to break things down biologically to what you could do with them scientifically. But it's about not necessarily about breaking the world down into objects, or at least not into the same way that we do it now. So when you talk about being in the image of God, I don't think that means that biologically in the same sort of way. I would kind of extrapolate that maybe the image of God is something more like, I mean, if I think about, you know, Christ says he's the way, the truth, and the life. If I think about God as, one way of thinking about God as being a way of being, then, you know, the image of God, the identity of God might have something to do with the way that existence, you know, is in its truest form. So if man is created in the image of God, in the way of God, and again, maybe I'm conflating some terms here, but then maybe it's like man has a, I mean, I'm not sure if even, I mean, I know a lot of Christians will kind of like contrast man with animals and say, well, you know, man's created in the image of God, but animals aren't. I don't know if I personally believe that's the case. I mean, I think man is created in the image of God, but I think that the universe is created in the image of God as well.
The universe is created in the image of God as well.
Again, it's like, if I make something, then it's like in my image. Like if I draw a picture, it's like, it's a manifestation of something that's inside me. And like, maybe some things, like, I mean, some art that an artist makes is like, it seems like it more deeply relates to who that artist is than other pieces of art that they do. So like, maybe, assuming that man is made in the image of God in a way that the rest of creation isn't, then maybe it's like
So
you know,
I kind of see what you're saying. There's like a specific artist, like you know that person's work. If you were to see their drawing, I'm gonna just Ryan Ottley. There's a comic called Invincible, one of my favorite comics of all time. He's got a very specific, just like there's a lot of them. There's a ton of them that have a very specific style. And when you see it somewhere else, you're like, wait a minute. That looks like so-and-so. And it turns out, yeah, it's so-and-so. So is that what you're kind of saying? The image of, so we can just say that these other drawings are in the image of type thing, Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And though, I mean, yeah, I think that's probably a good analogy. It's just that, yeah, there's some things that like are more deeply that artist's style. And it's like, not necessarily that they're just like trying to do a style. It's like, it's just something, it's them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've got a certain style that I do. It's just bunch of vomiting words. You can tell it's my thing. I understand. So Yahweh's style. So what would Yahweh's style be to, well, the Bible? Is the Bible a 2 Timothy 3:16, the breathed out words of Yahweh, useful for training?
Fundamentalists love to bring up that passage.
Do you believe that?
Do I believe? I mean, I believe the Bible. I believe that. At least I believe that it's meaningful. The question is like not necessarily.
All right.
Like I don't necessarily think that I know how to interpret the Bible in the right way. I think that like, I kind of appeal to my community. I have my immediate community. I have my historic community of the Christians who are like trying to interpret this. And it's like it doesn't seem like the question is whether or not the Bible is. Well, I mean, you can say whether or not it's true, but I mean. I want to skip past true because there might be some buried hidden meanings in that word, but at least the Bible is meaningful. It's not a question of whether or not it's meaningful. It's about whether or why it's meaningful. It's obviously meaningful.
Well, which parts would you say are meaningful?
Well, I mean, the Bible was kind of voted on and put together, kind of officially canonized in 300, I don't know, somewhere
a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a long time ago from now. I was going to say like a couple hundred years after, the time of Jesus, though, right? It was like,
yeah, it was like three. I want to say those like 300 like something.
There, yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
We're both.
We're in the right area. So someone will correct us.
Since we're both assuming 300, I think we might be on the right track. So yeah, somewhere around there, it's like, people, the community of Christians that had kind of developed, they had a set, like everybody had a sense that this is what belongs in here. And so, I mean,
there was a lot of things that were thrown out. There was a lot of fighting. There was a lot of work that went into the actual canonization of these things. And there's still today, they still fight about that crap. Oh, this one should be in there. This should be canon.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, I just had a friend send me one of these the other day.
Oh no!
Then just flip through the pages a little bit, and I mean, it's honestly bringing up some questions. Like, I mean, if I'm willing to say that that the Bible is deeply meaningful after all this time, and I still don't exactly know what the inspiration behind it. I don't. I mean, there's so many questions about like what does inspiration mean, or why was there this even though obviously there was a lot of argument, why was there this sense of unity that this stuff belonged. And I mean, there seems like this is an even more difficult story to kind of unpack and unwind because there's some obvious like red flags, in the way that it was produced. But then, I mean, I haven't read the whole thing. I've read a tiny bit, but it's like it's still...
For those on the audio only version,
I've got holding up here.
He's holding up the Book of Mormon.
Yeah. So, I mean, Mormons are much easier to pick on. I feel like because they're a kind of a more overtly culty group, but honestly, I mean, I'm hoping to chat with some Mormons soon. I want to have that conversation.
That they come to my door. Oh no, sorry, it's Jehovah's Witness. Every once in a while, Jehovah's Witnesses they stopped coming to my door actually recently. Yeah, I don't think they want to talk to me anymore. That old guy kind of got creeped out last time. Oh what? Oh, you know your Bible.
But you asked
Stay away from that house.
2 Timothy 3:16, like all Scripture is God breathed, or comes from. So I mean, obviously, you probably know a little bit about like the word breath in both Greek and Hebrew, and how it like has to do with like the spirit of something, right?
Right. So Yahweh sent his spirit down to influence people into writing it. And that's how, that's what I get out of it, you know?
Yeah.
And,
I mean, I think I would agree with that, but it's like, you could talk about whenever you're creating any sort of art or text, you're sort of possessed or you're in union with a spirit of that sort of. It's like when you do a like, let's say, this is a great example. Greta Van Fleet.
No.
Have you heard of that band?
No.
Okay, so they've done something that, I mean, I'm sure probably a lot of your listeners have heard of them. They've kind of tapped into 70s rock in a way that nobody else is doing right now. And especially this lead vocalist. You hear him sing, and it's insane that he's tapped into like the spirit of the 70s.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go into a little bit of like what you might mean by a spirit of something, but it's like there's at least sort of an abstraction of like, okay, you have an idea. I mean, even when I say the spirit of the 70s, or like you kind of what that means. It's like there's a sense in which this is what the music sounded like. This is what 70s rock is, and that like it's an abstraction, right? And so like the spirit of 70s rock is inhabiting that band. And they are creating something that is guided by, like, it's like Greta Van Fleet's album is the 70s rock breathed and useful for rocking out.
Nothing wrong with that. Well, yeah, I see it's I mean, if Yahweh is influencing this book, we should find things in it that are more helpful than I've found in it, such as you can take pretty much all of the Old Testament. There are so many things in there that are just horrific. And Yahweh explains that he does himself. He calls himself a jealous God that punishes children. He makes parents eat their children because they're not worshiping him. How do you feel about the worship aspect of it? Do you think that Yahweh was, I don't want to say moralistic, but in the right to get so angry and jealous for people not worshiping him in the Old Testament? Well, even in the New Testament, because, I don't know if you believe in hell, but we're all going to hell if you don't worship him, love only him. And that's torment for eternity. So do you think these are just and fair and a right thing to do? Do you believe he even wants to do these things? Maybe
part of something that's worth that is, as far as my understanding of the Bible and how I read the Bible. And I mean, honestly, most of my time spent engaging with the Bible at this point is like listening to people talk about the Bible or having discussions about the Bible. This morning I listened to a little bit of the book of Luke because I was like, crap, I'm going to go talk about the Bible with somebody. I haven't read the Bible in a while. But I mean, part of my way of engaging with the Bible is that I have begun to kind of more look at it through the lens of an ancient person and like, well, hopefully anyways. But I mean, I don't view the Bible as like, so I mean, the way certain fundamentalists are going to interpret that 2 Timothy 3:16 verse is that God wouldn't lie to us. Yeah. And it's like, okay, I mean, sure. But what is a lie? Is that like trying to manipulate somebody for negative purposes? I mean, whenever you say something, you're not saying like the fullness of the truth. You're not describing reality perfectly. You're saying, that's even what language is. It's a shorthand for things that you think might be the most useful, reference points for communicating what it is that you're trying to do. So I don't think God is trying to manipulate people in a negative way. I think that all these, I don't know if you want to stop there.
I mean, not influence people in a negative way. 1 Thessalonians, I believe it is. He sends the Jewish people a lie so that they'll believe the lie and then be condemned. And there's a lot of stuff in there he does that he just Saul. He sends an evil spirit down to Saul, so he'll throw a spear at David. I still don't understand what the point of that was, but twice I think it is. And it's just it's like he does all these horrific things. I don't really see the good in here. I'm missing the part where the good book is good. If you got Jesus says some nice things. Love your neighbor. Well, guess who said that before Jesus did? Buddha. The golden rule didn't originate with Jesus or Christianity. All these great ideas were borrowed from other people. and what's left is horrible things, eternal torture. Jesus even speaks about, thought crimes. If you even think about this, you're doomed for eternity. There's just, I see a lot of not good in this good book. You know what I mean?
And I'm glad that we get to spend longer than just an hour going through some of this stuff, because every single one of those things that you brought up just has me thinking, that's talk about that. But I mean, obviously we don't have
Let's go. I love rabbit holes, man. If there's a squirrel that goes by, I'm going to follow it.
Well, I just to back to before that a little bit, because I guess what I was trying to say is that when I'm looking at the Old Testament, especially, I'm not looking at it as, I don't look at it as literally the Holy Spirit taking somebody's hand. Like, I mean, this is the picture I had growing up.
Right.
And I very much see the Bible as a relational book of people attempting to understand God.
Yeah.
And I think that process
with the world around them, and what they've done is they've animated certain things and was it anthropomorphized different things. You get the volcanoes. Oh, God must be mad. The volcano's going, oh, here's a storm. Yahweh's pissed off at something I did. Oh man, I shouldn't have touched myself. I don't know. I mean, it's like that's how they thought. It was different. It was very superstitious. Holy cow! Just what happened? Kill something. God wants blood. It will be better that way. It's like you got to understand the way they thought, and to understand the way they thought, we have to go back in time, and it's very difficult to do.
Well, I mean, I don't like even so. Okay, something's going wrong. We better kill something. That's, I mean, from a certain perspective, that's a hilariously, I mean, primitive sounds like a negative word, but yeah, primitive, like silly way of dealing with things. But compared to the alternative of something. So there's two situations, or there's two responses to it. Okay, something's gone wrong. Mm-hmm. Well, there's somebody we can go blame that for, and let's go kill them. Mm-hmm. Or maybe somehow we've done something wrong. We should take this upon ourselves and give up something, or try to cleanse ourselves,
or kill our goat. Put the sin on the goat over there. Yeah, that's the guy. He's sin. Throw it all on him. Kill it.
Yeah. That's an interesting. I mean, that's get into Rene Girard and his whole theory of like scapegoating and stuff like that.
Yeah. I don't know what that Rene Girard is, but I love the scapegoating idea.
Yeah. I mean, so that's something that's like really common in especially we're talking about Israel, how all these different traditions came together, and like even older than the Christian tradition or the Jewish tradition, the Mesopotamian, their whole story about what's his name, Marduk, and like, he's the evil god who with them, it's like, okay, every year they kind of are saying like, we've done some wrong stuff, so we're going to actually blame it all on the king. He's our scapegoat. And then they kind of ritually reenact this, like, and they kill the king. I think usually, I've read a couple different versions about this, but sometimes they'll have like somebody else play the king and kind of symbolically act as the king. Usually it's like somebody they're going to kill anyways, which maybe that plays into the symbolism, but that's definitely a motif that's all through this stuff. So there's something useful about that too. Like, I mean,
absolutely.
Rene Girard, this French philosopher guy. His theory is that partially it's just like when a lot of shit goes down, everybody gets angry at each other. You get this rising tension of like, we got to have somebody who's the problem so we can finally like let all of our rage out.
Yeah.
I mean, eventually you have to be like, when you get frustrated every day, like let's say, you stub your toe on the same little spot in your house every single day. Sooner or later, you get so frustrated that frustration goes somewhere, and you need to get it out. Mm-hmm. Ideally, you can aim that frustration at something that actually has to do with the problem. But part of your new problem is just now that you're frustrated, right? And you need to get rid of that frustration. And so part of, I think, what Rene Girard, again, I haven't read this guy's book, but I've talked, his books, but I've talked to people about his ideas. So I have at least a loose understanding of his main riffs. And I mean, his theory is just, okay, once you get frustrated enough, so that's a personal example. Once a community gets frustrated enough, they need to kind of send that frustration somewhere. And so at least scapegoating deals with that. It doesn't deal with the problem of what they're frustrated about, but it deals with the problem of their frustration.
Right. Well, they come up with an idea as far as a lot of stuff you're talking about is from The Golden Bough by James Fraser, I think it is. Love that book. Matter of fact, it's sitting right here. great book, The Golden Bough, James Fraser. Highly recommend this thing. It's huge, it's ginormous, it's methodical. It goes through so many things. Like one of my favorite things in there is there was this belief that in order to get the crops to grow, they had to put everything into the guy, not physically but spiritually, all their things into the guy, and then smash him between two rocks, and his blood, now that had the God in it, would just bless the crops and whatnot. It was crazy. It was like, man, I can't even imagine living in those times, all that blood sacrifice and whatnot. But in there, it definitely talks about a more nature aspect of it, the pagan, where it originated from. A lot of these beliefs, as far as with the totem poles, they'd have a sacred animal or whatever, and then they'd kill it because it was the god, and then they'd eat it because then they'd get this power. Was it the spring and winter and whatnot? They would represent that. They'd burn trees. They'd burn figures of this godhead just to release him, to bring him out of escape from whatever sin thing he was trapped. It's amazing. So much into it. I can't even begin to explain it all. But that's exactly what I see as far as the Jesus story. It's an evolution from those old ancient ideas, and it's exactly how our stories progress.
How many times have we watched? Are you attaching a sense of like progress to? I mean, evolution fundamentally is like the distillation of different biological organisms until they kind of reach something more stable, right?
Well, my thing is the end would probably be the humanistic part of it. We would eventually realize that we're all in this together, and that burning somebody or killing something as a sacrifice or a boost in morale isn't the best way to go about things.
Well, I think you could argue that, and this maybe this is not a great argument. I don't know. This is an argument that seems interesting to me right now, anyways. That like maybe that was the best they were capable. I mean, maybe it was better than the alternative at the time. I think Steven Pinker in I think his book is called Enlightenment Now. He brings up, they talk about the death sentence. He talks about how, like, in societies that kind of where their general economic situation tends to rise up, eventually they stop, the death sentence stops being something that is part of those societies. Yeah. And I think part of his argument is that, I think he like kind of talks about that nuances is the luxury of being well off, basically. Like the more excess you have, the more excess time and excess security you have, the more, particularly you can deal with situations, the more you can spend time. It's like, I don't know how expensive it is to for the states that still the death sentence is legal in, those trials, I was listening to some debate about this, about whether or not the death sentence should be found, because one of the arguments was that they shouldn't, because it just costs too much money. It's like millions of dollars worth of different people's time going into this investigation. Like it's a hugely expensive event, investigating and then eventually killing somebody.
Right.
Even there, it's like, but I mean, just to do that sort of a punishment, it's like, because we have this time and this expectation for justice, like we're not willing to kill somebody until we've done all this conversation about whether or not they're guilty or not. And like previously, I mean, you're just recognizing that the amount of time, the amount of expense it takes in order to like try to come to a really good understanding of justice in a situation. Like you look at a society that just is not that well off, doesn't have the time for that, is struggling just to get by and to maintain any sense of peace. Like they have to be a little bit less. They don't have as much space, as much luxury for nuance. They just have to deal with situations as they come, right? And like if you have any inclination that this guy is a murderer, we got to get rid of him, because that's the best. That's the only. We don't have like huge jail cells that we can keep people locked away and keep the rest of us protected. If there's it's likely this person's going to cause disaster for the rest of the people, then we need to get rid of them, right?
Well, rehabilitation, we should probably perfect our rehabilitation. I think that's half the problem right there.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not arguing that we should go back to that. I'm saying that I see a progression away from killing people. Yeah. But I'm saying I think that given a certain context, like it may be the most even sort of pragmatic option, as opposed to the alternative where it's just like, oh, well, we're just going to be compassionate and rehabilitate people. It's like if you're living in a society that's just discovered language, it's, I mean, an example you could look to is just like, okay, you look at a troop of chimps And like, if they suspect or they've seen one of their chimps doing something that's going to put the rest of the group at risk, they don't have, I mean, maybe they have some sense of like proto language. They don't have the ability, they don't have the luxury of like having a nuanced discussion about how they're going to deal with this. They just take the guy and they beat him to death outside the border of the thing, right?
But that's what sets us apart, though. We're able to empathize, I think, and that's again where the humanism comes in. I think we've evolved into more of a humanistic society, and we're getting better. We're definitely not there yet. We've got a long way to go, but I think that's what we've progressed through. Again, I've been reading a lot lately about ancient history and whatnot, and before we had kings and settlements and whatnot, we'd destroy each other. We would start something, a civilization would just crumble because they had no leadership. And even if they had leadership, the leadership was so bad that they would just crumble and have to start over again. We learn our lessons, and eventually we learned, okay, so the king's got to be at least halfway decent, or else this is going to happen, or people are going to revolt, or the country's going to go under. There's such a fine tune, and it takes us a long time because we are slow learners as human beings. I think we continue to make the wrong decisions,
especially as groups, because it takes longer to teach groups, something than an individual.
Absolutely. I think the internet helps. I think this kind of stuff helps. These conversations we're having, your show, my show, and all the ones in between. So I think we're heading in the right direction. I think we're doing our best, some of us. And I don't see how Yahweh or God fits into any of that. He seems like he's just kind of watching, and from the outside, he's not really helping out. His book didn't help out at all. I mean, we had slavery for how long after that? Because he couldn't tell everybody slavery is a bad thing. We shouldn't keep humans as property. He refused to say that, apparently, or neglected to. And because of that, we had all these issues. And then the women issues as well, because the Bible says that men are dominant. What? And then the earth, where we got global warming and stuff because we're supposed to, subdue the earth because Yahweh said so in the Bible? There's a lot of issues with the Bible I see that aren't as beneficial as other options.
I mean, I think there might be a lot that this nuance argument might be able to accomplish, though. I think, like, as far as the Bible doesn't explicitly state, I mean, the Bible even tells us what animals we're allowed to eat, but I think probably in 100 years, pretty much everybody is probably going to be extremely morally against anybody who's ever eaten an animal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I mean, the Bible doesn't tell us not to do that. Pardon?
We'll probably all be eating crickets by then.
I don't know. I mean, at least you could conceive of a world in which that's everyone's sort of default position, and like it's inconceivable to think of somebody who thought that like eating a hamburger was all right with real meat. That's like evil, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't think we're at a place where we have the luxury of that level of nuance for like how we value life yet. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of people going vegan. There's a lot of people who feel like they're ready to make that shift, but I don't think that humanity in general is there yet. And maybe we'll never get there. I don't know. That's kind of an intuitive just wondering. Maybe we'll go that direction. But I mean, to say that like God should have said, well, you should be acting the way that you will 1,000 years in the future right now. I don't think that you can make a strong argument that making drastic changes to society, even if they might be more stable in the future, all at once is really the best way of going about making positive societal change. I think it's more about even just like as a person is like, you just suddenly just tell them all the true stuff they need to know. They haven't had the experience though of learning it. Like there's a huge difference between just being educated about something and like learning it practically. And it's like, if we teach people, we give people the right tools to learn about truth, then they develop a much deeper experience of truth and a much deeper sense of wisdom about how to use that truth than if we just tell them the truth. And this is like a deep part of the way Jewish teaching works, even in like the New Testament. This is the way like the Jews always kind of like indirect, like prodding people towards the truth rather than just saying it outright, because they kind of recognize that too. It's like, if you can teach people how to discover the truth as opposed to just telling them the truth. I mean, it's the classic, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. You teach a man to fish, you can fish for a lifetime. If God is teaching us how to search for truth in a way that's more meaningful. Like
How is God teaching us? How is God teaching us? Period. Is it the Bible?
I mean, you could say the Bible. I mean, it's Christianity is a big thing. It's interesting to think about, that we kind of distinguish religion as like a part of our lives as opposed to just life. Which I think that's kind of, again, that's sort of a recent phenomenon. I think the way in which Christians lived and Jewish people, religious people, again, it's weird to call them religious, I think, with their context, but just people who believed in God at that point, I think that they're lost my sentence, I guess.
You're good. I do it all the time. Twice in this conversation alone.
I think you got to pick up the ball for a second.
You're good.
Maybe I'll get back.
So I wrote down that Yahweh is teaching us, and you had mentioned that the Bible is the way that Yahweh is teaching us, and again we go back to the same thing. I find very little in there, if anything at all, that is beneficial. And again, we can find these sources of inspiration and morality through other sources. We don't need a book that tells us to kill gay people, witches, and disobedient kids. We don't need that.
I think actually, I think this might be an interesting avenue to walk down, because I mean, you bring up a lot of things in the Bible that are like at first glance seem pretty obviously dumb, right? I'm not saying your points. I'm saying the points that the Bible seems to be making, right?
Yeah.
And to be honest, from my perspective, that's part of what makes me like the longevity of those stories. Is that, I mean, and this is something that kind of comes up in philosophy of art, or when you're just learning how to. I mean, I like to write music. Part of one of the things you look for one of the things I look for when writing lyrics is that I try to find a way of saying things that, when people first hear it, they go, "What?" Right? You look for paradoxes. I mean, and this is a lot of what makes art interesting to us. Is things don't resolve immediately. When they force us to kind of stare at them and think about them. And part of what seems to be a deeply meaningful part of the Bible, element of the Bible, is that these stories force us to keep talking about them, because they're not obvious what they mean or what they're getting at. So, I mean, I think the fundamentalist who feels like he's got the whole Bible solved, I think that's not an especially healthy position to be in, because, I mean, from my perspective, part of the point of the Bible is that you don't get it. And so it forces you to have relationships with other people and to talk about this stuff and try to figure it out. Like, if your tradition is based on something that's simple and easy to understand, you kind of are done processing the core, texts of that religion pretty quick. But if the stories that your whole community are based on keep on reinventing themselves to you, and keep on frustrating you, and keep on making you have to think about them again and again, and for some reason it seems like every time you thought about them, something new that interesting to you seems to pop out, then that's a pretty meaningful story. I mean, that's what we look for in art. So, I mean, looking at the Bible as a piece of art, it seems like it's one of the it may be the best piece of art that's ever been created.
Well, it's stolen art. A lot of those things are stolen in there and repurposed.
I mean, every
for the
art
Christian.
is stolen. We're all inspired by the other. I mean, most movies that you see now are inspired by other stories too, right?
To an extent, yeah. Yeah, I mean, like you said, with the spirit of it in there. Yeah, no, I mean, but wouldn't you think the original source would be the best one to go for, as opposed to the one who's, I guess
I think the originals are really interesting. Like I said, I'm really interested in mythology, and I really love the other versions of these stories. I think they oftentimes provide a lot of insight that you miss if you just read the Christian version of the story.
Just like, let's go with Alien. If you just watch Alien, you're missing a lot of the story. You get to Aliens, the second one, oh man, you're in a whole new world of awesome right there. It's like, I understand. So my thing didn't play out very well. But no, sometimes the sequels are better,
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not trying to, like, I do really, I think this guy, some people may have a problem with him. Some people find him more interesting or not. But I mean, C.S. Lewis, I find really inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
I love the way, I don't know if you've read any of his stuff or are familiar with
Just the stuff my brother sends me.
is your brother a Christian?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, he wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. He wrote, I mean, one of his most popular, like, sort of almost apologetic books is called Mere Christianity. Probably had that one thrown at you.
Yeah, just little snippets of it. Snippets.
But, I mean, his take on, I mean, he was really, really into mythology, too. He especially liked Norse mythology. To him, it was like, again, kind of what I said at the beginning, the fact that so many groups, even not in connection with each other, but many of them in connection with each other, found these stories meaningful and told their own versions of them, doesn't speak to say, oh, well, these stories are dumb or wrong. It says, to me, it seems to speak to a deep intuition that we have, that, like, something about these stories sticks.
Well, it doesn't make them true, though. It just means that we like stories. Dude, we love stories. I mean, I got bookshelves of stories and DVDs and books. I mean, series. And
what are you trying to say when you're saying true? What do you mean?
I don't know. What did I say? True. I don't know. I got tons of stories, though, but we just want to spread stories. It's not truth. It's some man's truth. Yeah, there's a lot of people that have different ideas and different opinions, but that doesn't make it true.
Well, that's what I'm asking. So what makes something true?
What makes something true? What makes something true? Well, let's go with peer-reviewed evidence is something that helps out with the trueness of it. I can't say for certain that much is true, honestly.
Sure. I mean, and I would agree with you there. I don't feel like I have a direct line access to any truth.
Yeah, like I can have confidence in
utterly
something.
certain of anything.
Yeah. Yeah, we get that whole discussion.
I mean, maybe we should, but I mean, I think you said peer review. I think that's an important part of the way we humans process things that we think are true or are worth paying attention to. And I think that, I mean, I can personally find things in the Bible that I'm frustrated by or think don't make sense.
Yeah.
But I have a peer review of a religion that's lasted for several thousand years that says that they think this is still an important. These are important stories.
How do you think it's lasted, though?
How do I think? I mean,
yeah, why has it lasted throughout history for so long? From what I'm seeing and what I've read, it's pretty bloody. It's a bloody history. It's fought its way through. It's conquered things. It's destroyed people. It's forced its way in.
If the story was like utterly just about brutal victory and destroying everybody who opposes you, I feel
that's
like
what Revelation is. That's the whole of the thing. That's the end story, you know. I mean, God's going to come back and destroy everybody who doesn't believe in him or is
that's
sexually impure.
A popular within Christian circles reading of Revelation. I mean, when I try to read Revelation, I mean, for one thing, it's one thing that's really important when approaching the Bible that I've started to learn, at least that I think is important. Again, I'm not certain of anything. What seems to be important when approaching the Bible is that you understand genre too, right? And Revelation is an apocalypse. It's not the apocalypse. I mean, I guess it's the apocalypse as far as Christianity is concerned. It's the one that was part of our canon. But like, it's like, you know, we understand how to watch horror movies. We know what a horror movie is. We have like certain expectations when watching something of that genre. We don't get frustrated at it for not doing something that we were expecting it to do. Or like if somebody tells like, what's Pride and Prejudice and Zombies or Abe Lincoln Vampire Slayer. Yeah. It's like when somebody tells those stories and they say, okay, here's a horror movie about Abraham Lincoln. It's like, you don't get frustrated at it for not telling the story, you know, historically correctly. It's like you have the expectation of what that genre is. And okay, they're doing an apocalypse. I get it. I know what an apocalypse is. I'm going to read this story. This is an apocalypse.
Historical fiction.
I mean, I don't even know if to me, it seems like it reads a lot more like, you know, epic poetry than it does, you know,
fan fiction. That's something.
Sure. I mean, again, there are certain parts of the Bible that are like, I think in general, when a lot of the authors who are writing stuff in the Bible are writing historical stuff, it's intentionally a sort of historical fiction because they're trying to compress a lot of things into a shorter story. They're trying, like, even when it seems like they're being really particular, they're trying to include as much information as possible. They start talking about all kinds of numbers and stuff. I don't think, again, they're trying to be exhaustive with the information there. It's just they're trying to actually compress even more numerological, like symbolic information into the story as well, which people at that point had more of I think anyways, they had more of an understanding of, okay, these numbers have this sort of connotation poetically, and they relate to this sort of pattern of reality. And so if we reference this number, then people kind of know what we're doing with the story. Kind of like a nod.
Kind of like a numerological version of Amy Grant.
I'm not sure. Maybe.
I don't know. It sounds good though. Well, we're about out of time here. I just want to end it on one last question. It's probably going to last another hour. But why does Garrett believe? Why are you a Christian?
I'm glad we get 2 hours after this, man. I still haven't worked out the answer to that one. I mean, partially it's
I don't know. It's good.
I appreciate. I think it's important to widen our horizon about how we consider truth to beyond what we can rationally figure out. I've been reading this other book recently called "The Master and His Emissary," which talks about the maybe you've heard of this kind of theory of two sides of the brain. Originally, the theory was something like, oh, the left side is responsible for math, the right side is part of art. But that's kind of been debunked since then. This guy has kind of gone back and reinvigorated the conversation and debunked the debunkers. Not to say that, oh, this side does math and this side does art, but actually that the different hemispheres of the brain perceive reality differently. And the sort of attention that you pay to reality creates a different understanding of reality. So the left hemisphere sees reality in a more particular, focused way, and the attention of the right side of the brain is more open and general and holistic. And
fascinating.
So rationality, I mean, if you want to kind of link it back to that, it's like, okay, you take all of reality and you want to try and develop a rational argument for truth about something. You shave off most of the information and you try to distill it down to what you think is the most important elements of truth for coming to your conclusion. And you do that, and you focus on a few things in order to prove a very precise particular point. But a lot of the way even our brains tend to process reality, and most of the information we're actually willing to act on that actually is useful for us is not figured out rationally. Most of the processing that we do every day in life, even when it comes to math, is actually accomplished by a more holistic, intuitive understanding of things. Even when we're doing math, it's like we add things up and then we check it with our intuitive sense, and we're like, does that seem right? That doesn't seem right. And then we even if we felt really confident about our rational perspective of solving a math problem, we still actually it starts and returns to intuitive reason always. And so as far as my relationship with Christianity and with God, part of it's I appeal to the intuition of my community, and part of it's my own intuition. I feel like God, I feel like that's a meaningful concept, and I feel encouraged by my community to treat God as if he were my father and as a person. And so I try to do that.
Interesting. So you haven't actually had an encounter, or he hasn't spoken to you, or I talked to one guy who sat in his car with a car levitated.
I mean, that's all.
You haven't
really
had an encounter like that?
I don't really know how to process all of that. I've especially going to Bible school. It's a very charismatic Bible school. I've had situations where I prayed for somebody and saw a physical healing, and I don't really know what to do with that. I mean, it's definitely causes me to. It's those experiences that cause me to keep on rethinking things. And it's important because it's like I was talking about art earlier. It's it's a moment where just my perception of reality gets a rip in it, and I have to keep thinking about stuff.
Interesting. So what was this physical healing that you saw on the spot?
Well, 2 times I can actually remember. One was something pretty simple. My friend was just being a goofball and jumped off some rock and really twisted his arm up and bad. And I just prayed very confidently and very fierily that he would be healed. And my friend, I loved him. I was hoping, I really wanted him to feel better. I didn't feel like God owed me a miracle or anything. I just thought, hey, Christians, we believe in this. Pray for him. Hopefully he feels better. And on the spot, it was suddenly his arm was totally screwed up, and then it was totally fine.
Was it broken? Was there a bone sticking out?
No,
was it sideways?
There's still some fun room in that story to wonder, well, maybe it just got better.
I mean, I hurt my arm every once in a while. I'll stub my toe or whatever, and then guess what? It gets better.
Obviously, the story has stuck with me even when I've tried to kind of push out any sense of irrationality to my worldview. It still kind of comes back, and I'm like, so I'm not trying to say I certainly know, I don't know what happened there. I can't explain it. I mean, placebo effect is an amazing thing, and I think that's a lot of what prayer is, and I appreciate that. I'm interested that our tradition has figured out what the placebo effect did long before we figured it out via science. I think that's great. The one other example, it was during a Halloween conference where there was like some night, there was a church it was part of an activity of the school. They were like trying to scare the hell out of people. They wanted to like make sure that they knew what was coming, which maybe we should talk some more about hell in a bit. But
I love that. Yes.
I was there, and there was like a prayer room afterwards, and somebody came in, and she had she couldn't walk. I don't remember the exact details, but she couldn't walk. I think she had crutches. She walked in, and she just wanted to pray for her. And I was kind of at a bit of a turning point in my faith where I was like, this has to be real. If it's not real, then what am I doing? I mean, there was a lot of internal processing, a lot of stuff going on, and so I was like, she has got to get healed. This is a polar opposite of the other situation, whereas I felt like this needs to happen. It wasn't just offering it up in faith. I believe this is going to happen, and I'm going to will it into being. And it was like I prayed for this woman for about an hour.
Wow.
And when she left, she was walking.
Wow.
A week later, she wasn't.
Said, I'll just walk. Stop praying for me. It's been an hour. I got stuff to do. I'll just walk out of here.
But like I said, she walked out of there. She couldn't walk when she came in. She walked out of there. But then a week later, her leg was screwed up again. So that definitely made me have to rethink things again and again, too.
Well, my next line of questioning is going to be obviously the ones that it doesn't work for. I've talked to several pastors who have prayed for their kids who are dying of cancer or painful of the diseases, and the whole church, the whole community, the whole city in some instances are praying for this kid to get better, and nothing happens. It happens all the time. We'll pray for safety. Well, they still get shot up in church. There's still things that happen that are horrible that get prayed to stop or fix or whatever, and they don't. But your friend's arm and this 1 hour prayer session lady, it's different. So why do you think that is? What would be more, could you use this power that you have apparently and go to a children's hospital and start fixing kids? I think that'd be pretty amazing. I'd be like, wow, this Yahweh guy's not too bad. Look at him doing all this stuff through this guy over here. Wow, Garrett could be the conduit, the one. I don't know. But why do you think it works that way?
That's obviously one of the biggest questions you can get to, and I feel like it's almost I would be disrespectful to have an answer to it because I don't want to disrespect the question. I big one. It's I don't know. I mean,
I don't know is honestly the best answer. I love it. I mean, you don't, because we don't understand it. And the whole thing with prayer in the Bible, it tells us, ask and you will receive. And if there are two or more of you are gathered, I will help you, and blah, 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 blah. All these promises that are made through this good book, this scripture that is supposed to be true, and it doesn't work. It's more like random as opposed to an actual divine intervention,
I mean, assuming we know how it would work or that it wouldn't look random if it wasn't actually divine. There's a lot of expectations kind of assumed into that understanding. And that's kind of what I want to try to get away from. It's that like a big part of my relationship with God, and that I think is important about Christianity and religion in general, is the mystery of God. And so I'm not just trying to like dance around and say, well, it's just a mystery, but
although you just did that.
I guess I'm not trying to justify it. Just say, well, you don't get to know that. I know it. I'm saying I don't know it either, but despite the many things that confuse me about it, it's obviously it's been enough to turn you off, but it seems like it's been enough to turn me off, but something about it has continued to land for me. I don't know.
Understandable. I mean, everybody has their own thing, and then that's why we have these conversations. That's why we have these conversations. Hash out those differences. But in the Bible itself, it says that Yahweh is not the author of confusion. That's 1 Corinthians. I was stuck on that one. It's 1 Corinthians that Yahweh says he's not the author of confusion. And I am so confused. You're confused. Dude next door is confused. I mean, we're all confused. Nobody really has all the answers, even though the Bible claims to be the answer. Or, what do they call it? The Bible, the basic instructions before leaving Earth, I'm sure you've heard that one.
I definitely have. I mean, I think let's keep talking about it, because I think there's a lot of charged up things about the way that we've used the Bible, and especially having like little taglines about it being a simple instruction manual. I think the Bible is anything but simple. And I don't think that, Corinthians, God's not the author of confusion. That's an interesting, I mean, I would have to go and kind of look at that. Maybe we can look at that a little bit together today. But I don't think, I just intuitively to try to think about, unpack that from what I'm thinking about right now. When an artist, again, I want to relate it back to art. When an artist creates a really meaningful piece, it confounds you. But it doesn't necessarily usually about life. It pulls you up
there. Sorry.
All right. Am I back? Can you hear me again?
There you go. Okay.
I was going to say, when an artist creates a really deeply moving, beautiful, meaningful art, it confounds you, and it makes you step back and makes you have to wonder about life. It doesn't
sometimes.
Still here?
Oh, there you are. Sorry, you cut out again.
It's the demons. They're trying to.
Now, did Yahweh send them or did I send them?
I think something can be sort of initially confusing without ultimately, pulling you down into a tunnel of confusion. Like, I think confusion might be the first step to, like, again, I don't think confusion on its own, isolated, is like a good feature. I'm saying that, like, something that's really moving and something that's really meaningful, it catches you off guard and it sends you into a little bit of a on when you first encounter it. But the experience ultimately leads you to a deeper sense of meaning, maybe a deeper sense of understanding, or a deeper sense.
Oh man, you're cutting out so bad right there. I'm so sorry. Deeper understanding, and it was it. That's all I got.
That's probably good enough, hopefully.
Well, we are out of time, though. I do appreciate all of your answers today, and I'll be on your show a little bit later today. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to switching seats here.
Yeah. Thanks for
being in the
having me on.
passenger seat for a minute.
Really good.
I appreciate your time, man, and we'll talk to you later today.
All right. Sounds good.
And that's all the show there is for you today. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard and want to help keep the recording light on, simply go to patreon.com/BSW the podcast and sign up to be a supporter of the show. Your episodic tithes of $1 or more will give you access to the patron feed, unaired conversations, early access to each episode, and much more. For the latest events, BSW swag, and a peek behind the scenes, head on over to the show's ever-evolving webpage at thebiblesayswhat.com. The Bible Says What the book is out. Head on over to thebiblesayswhat.com and get yourself and your grandma a signed copy. Supplies are limited. Quick shout out to Rob Kraft for grabbing himself a signed copy of The Bible Says What the book. Thanks, Rob. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks to the cosmic powers of the internet, it is now possible to buy me a beer or coffee online. Simply go to buymeacoffee.com/BSW the podcast and click the appropriate buttons. If you can't support the show monetarily, please like, share, and or leave a review. As always, you can find me at the Bible Says What Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or Instagram pages. You can also reach me at bswthepodcast@gmail.com. And no matter which platform you use to listen to your podcasts, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on the next episode. Until then, would you kindly pick up your Bibles and read them? From in the beginning to the musical apocalypse, this is The Bible Says What. I'm your host, Mike Wiseman. The sense of community, the belonging to something greater than ourselves, stems from deep in our genes. The benefits of being part of a herd, just kept coming out. Working its way. Working my way out of your mouth.
Forever and ever. Well, that's not good, baby.
None of what I'm doing right now is going to help any for recording. No, that will just make me look more stoned than I already do.
I got a song for you.
I was going to make a show, but then I got high. I was going to record an intro, but then I got high.
I was gonna go Otis.
All right, let's see. Let's get all the burping out.